My condo's service lift is broken, but a rude neighbor still expects me to wait forever. Even management says I'm right, but she won't stop screaming at me. I live in a high-rise condo building where the general rule is that pet owners should only use the service lift when taking their pets up and down. This policy is intended to keep the residents' lifts clean and free of pet-related messes. While I understand the reasoning behind the rule, there has been a major problem for the last few months. The service lift has been completely out of order. My condo unit is on the 30th floor. Since the service lift is unavailable, I've had no choice but to use the residence lift to take my dog outside for walks. My dog is small, well-behaved, and never causes any issues. He doesn't bark in the elevator, doesn't jump on anyone, and has never had an accident inside the building. Despite this, one particular resident has made it her mission to make my life difficult. A few weeks ago, one of the condos in the building started undergoing major renovations. As a result, one of the two residents' lifts has been wrapped on the inside to prevent damage from construction materials. The building management has designated this as a temporary service lift since it's more resistant to potential damage. However, it's still technically a resident's lift, and it's available for use by all tenants. This is where the trouble began. The same resident who had previously given me dirty looks for using the elevator with my dog has now started outright yelling at me. Every time she sees me in the elevator with my dog, she demands that I only use the wrapped lift. She says it's the designated service lift, and I have no excuse not to use it. The problem is that I don't have any control over which lift arrives first when I press the button. The elevators run on a simple algorithm that sends whichever one is closest. I can't selectively call the wrapped lift unless I'm lucky enough for it to be the one that comes. I live on the 30th floor, so waiting for a specific lift, especially during peak hours, would be completely unreasonable. I've even offered to wait for the next lift if she's uncomfortable sharing one with my dog, but that wasn't good enough for her. She insists that, as a dog owner, it's my responsibility to wait for the wrapped lift no matter how long it takes. Her reasoning is that pets are dirty and could spread germs or shed fur in the elevator. But my dog is clean, well-groomed, and doesn't shed excessively. It's not as if I'm letting him jump on the walls or dirty the floor. I carry him when necessary, and he remains calm the entire ride. Despite my efforts to be polite, the situation escalated. One day, as I entered the elevator, she began screaming at me about how I was selfish and disrespectful for not following the rules. Her aggressive behavior caught the attention of other residents, some of whom gave her puzzled looks. Others seemed uncomfortable witnessing the interaction. I calmly explained that the service lift had been out of order for months and that I had no choice but to use the residence lifts. That did nothing to stop her. After that incident, she started filing complaints to the building management. I received a notice about the complaints, but when I explained the situation, management seemed understanding. They acknowledged that the service lift's downtime had caused inconvenience and assured me that I wasn't doing anything wrong. They even confirmed that I could use any available lift until repairs were completed. Still, the resident didn't let up. She took to glaring at me in the lobby, making passive-aggressive comments within earshot and deliberately waiting for another lift if she saw me enter one. I decided the best course of action was to ignore her completely. I don't make eye contact. I don't respond to her remarks, and I pretend she doesn't exist. It's not the most comfortable solution, but I refuse to engage in unnecessary conflict. Some of my neighbors have quietly expressed their support. One even mentioned that the resident has a history of confronting people over trivial matters. While it's reassuring to know that I'm not alone in my frustrations, I can't help but wonder if I should have handled things differently. Maybe I could have been more patient or tried harder to avoid her. On the other hand, I feel that I'm being unfairly targeted for simply trying to navigate a difficult situation. The service lift is expected to be repaired within the next couple of months. Until then, I plan to keep using whichever lift arrives first. I'm mindful of other residents and respectful of shared spaces, but I won't go out of my way to cater to someone who is being unreasonable. If she truly has such a strong aversion to dogs, perhaps she should consider adjusting her own habits instead of demanding that I inconvenience myself. So, am I the a-hole for continuing to use the resident's lift with my dog and ignoring a hostile neighbor? Or is she in the wrong for trying to enforce a rule that simply isn't practical right now? Story 2. I drove my friend home every day without a thank you, but when she assumed I'd drive her in the rain without asking, I finally left her behind. I live about 10 minutes away from my school, while my friend lives roughly 5 minutes from the school in the opposite direction. She's always asked me for rides home. At first, I didn't mind helping her out. It's natural to want to lend a hand to a friend, especially when it's only a few extra minutes out of my way. However, over time, things started to change, and not in a good way. It reached a point where she stopped asking altogether and just started following me to my car without even a simple, "Hey, do you mind giving me a ride home?" She assumed I would take her without question. Even on days when she had plenty of time to ask her family for a ride, she seemed to prefer relying on me. It wasn't that she was in a desperate situation, it was that she simply didn't try. What bothered me most was her lack of gratitude. I can't even remember the last time she genuinely thanked me. A quick thanks would have sufficed, but even that seemed to be too much for her. I understand that driving her isn't the biggest inconvenience in the world, but it's still my parents' car. They worked hard to provide it for me, and I try to treat it with respect. I'm not an irresponsible teenager who doesn't care about where I drive or who I drive around. Despite my frustrations, I continued driving her home. I never acted too angry or annoyed about it. I kept the peace because I genuinely wanted to be a good friend. But the frustration continued to build. Every day, it felt like I was being taken advantage of. One particular day, it was snowing heavily, and the temperature had dropped below freezing. She was preparing to walk home. Even though she had plenty of time to arrange a ride with her family, she hadn't bothered. Once again, she assumed I'd offer. And, of course, I did. I couldn't let her walk home in those conditions, no matter how frustrated I was. But today was different. We got out of school late. It was already dark, around 50 degrees, and a light drizzle had begun. She had more than enough time to call or text her family for a ride. I saw her standing nearby, visibly annoyed at the weather. "Oh God, it's drizzling?" she grumbled. Oh geez. She didn't ask for a ride. She didn't explain her situation. She just followed me, waiting for me to extend the offer once again. This time, I didn't. I walked to my car, got in, and drove home without her. It wasn't that I wanted to be mean or petty. I just wanted to see some effort on her part. Was it so hard to explain yourself? Could she not simply ask nicely? Where were her manners? A little bit of respect and appreciation would have gone a long way. I understand that sometimes people struggle to ask for help, but she had no problem receiving it repeatedly. It wasn't my car, not my gas, but my parents' car that I was responsible for. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being used. Now, I'm left wondering if I made the right decision. Was I being unreasonable? Should I have just given her a ride to avoid conflict? I don't know if my decision to leave without her was justified or if I should have handled things differently. Am I the a-hole for finally saying no and not driving her home? Story 3. My best friend of 12 years blocked me after I warned her about her controlling fiancé. Now she says I caused trauma and wants nothing to do with me. Jane, 27, female, and I have been best friends for over 12 years. We met in high school, and since then, we've been inseparable. We've celebrated each other's milestones, supported one another through breakups, career changes, and everything in between. There's never been a time when I felt like I couldn't count on her, and I hope she's felt the same about me. My sister is also close to Jane, and the three of us have always had a strong bond. But now, for the first time, I fear that bond may be broken. Jane started dating Eddie, 36, male, about 6 months ago. He's 10 years older than her, which initially didn't bother me. Age gaps can work if the relationship is built on mutual respect. But from the beginning, there were things that gave me pause. The few times we've met Eddie, he came across as controlling and dismissive. He interrupted Jane often and made sarcastic comments at her expense. At first, I brushed it off, thinking perhaps he was just awkward or trying too hard to be funny. But the more I heard about him, the less comfortable I became. It was hard to get a complete picture because Jane rarely brought him around. Every time my sister or I suggested hanging out, Jane was either busy with Eddie or spending time with his friends. I understand that couples naturally spend a lot of time together in the beginning, but it felt like she was disappearing. I missed my best friend. A particularly troubling moment occurred 3 months into their relationship. My sister was celebrating her engagement, and we had been planning the event for weeks. Jane was supposed to be there, but hours before the party, she canceled. Her reason? Eddie was sick, and she needed to take care of him. I tried to be understanding, but my sister was hurt. They argued, and Jane passionately defended Eddie, insisting he was her priority. Apologies were exchanged later, and we tried to move on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then came the news that Jane and Eddie were getting married. She announced it last week, saying they had gotten engaged in December and planned to marry in just a couple of months. I was shocked. I wanted to be happy for her, but I couldn't help but feel concerned. They had barely been together for half a year, and there were so many unresolved red flags. My sister and I sat her down to express our worries. We weren't trying to attack her happiness, we just wanted her to slow down and think this through. We suggested that she wait until at least their 1-year anniversary before making such a life-altering decision. I brought up the fact that Eddie had gotten out of a long-term relationship only a week before meeting her. Worse, she had previously told me she found messages on his phone where he proclaimed to a friend that he still loved his ex. Jane had brushed it off, but it stayed with me. The conversation did not go well. I'll admit, we were harsh. I wanted to protect her, and in my frustration, my words came out more strongly than I intended. I warned her that rushing into marriage could lead to heartbreak and even divorce. I never meant to imply that she was incapable of making her own decisions, but Jane felt attacked. She accused us of predicting the failure of her relationship and said I had caused her trauma by speaking so bluntly. I felt terrible. I apologized repeatedly, trying to explain that my intentions came from a place of love. For a day, it seemed like we might move past it, but then she went no contact. I'd send her messages checking in, and she wouldn't respond. My sister and I were devastated. We sought advice from other friends who knew about the situation. They suggested that Jane might not fully understand why we were so concerned, because we had never explicitly voiced our opinions about Eddie before. So, I made the difficult decision to be completely honest with her. I listed all the behaviors that worried me, his controlling tendencies, the lack of respect he showed her, and the possessiveness that seemed to isolate her from her support system. I reminded her of how strong and independent she had always been, and expressed my fear that Eddie was diminishing her light. My hope was that Jane would see we were only trying to protect her. Instead, my honesty triggered an even bigger fallout. Jane accused us of being toxic and judgmental. She said we had no right to criticize her relationship and that our so-called advice was just an attack on her happiness. The words cut deeply. She blocked us and declared our friendship over. Jane even admitted that she had been considering ending our friendship for a while, making it clear that this wasn't solely about our recent conversation. Now, I'm left wondering if I crossed a line. Maybe I should have been gentler. Maybe I should have trusted her to make her own decisions without interference. But how could I stand by in silence? When I genuinely believe she might be putting herself in a harmful situation, it's agonizing to lose someone I love so much, especially when my intentions were never malicious. I know that people sometimes see things differently when they're in the middle of a relationship. Love can cloud judgment, and perhaps Jane is just trying to hold on to the happiness she's found. It hurts to think that she now views me as an enemy when all I wanted was to be a friend. So, am I the one in the wrong? Should I have kept my concerns to myself and supported her decision unconditionally? Was it unfair of me to voice my worries so strongly? I'm struggling to find clarity and understand if I truly was the one who damaged our friendship beyond repair.